I was 17 years old and had been struggling with daily headaches on top of experiencing around 5 major, debilitating migraines that month. This is why I simply lost hope in life, had zero desire to go on, and did not hesitate to take a combination of antidepressants and anti-anxiety medication mixed with vodka. I wasn't explicitly attempting anything harmful, but I think subconsciously I was quite open to the idea of a physical shutdown. I felt more than willing to surrender to it. I was physically exhausted, dealing with 1 or 2 migraines per month and daily headaches for nearly a year. At such a young age, it felt like my life was slipping away, and the agony I endured seemed unbearable with no glimpse of hope. My best friend, who lived with my mother and me, remained by my side throughout. She later told me that I had stopped breathing, and my mother had called an ambulance, which rushed me to the hospital to have my stomach pumped. Now, here is the central part of my experience. I lay in my bed, and the effects of the medication mixed with vodka were making me drowsy. Initially, I thought I was simply drifting off to sleep until I became aware of the most distinct and unusual sensations in my chest and lungs. It felt as though my heart was beating irregularly or with a strange rhythm in my chest. I then recall sensing that my body was somehow signaling to me that this was the end, that I was about to depart this world. I remember reacting with a sense of relief, as if any attachments I had to my parents, whom I loved deeply, and to this world, this life, my friends, and myself, were things I no longer wished to be a part of. I was ready to let go of it all to escape the torment within my body. It was as if my complete acceptance of the idea of passing on helped my body let go, not resisting the process. I felt entirely at peace and, in fact, strangely content with this concept. I experienced a sensation of floating and began to perceive my body on the bed while my friend cried frantically. For a brief moment, I felt a twinge of sympathy for my body, as if it were an old friend with whom I had empathized. Nevertheless, I was done with it and yearned to move on without it. Once that fleeting moment passed, I felt propelled into an instant darkness. I describe it as a swirling darkness, slowly swirling within itself, somewhat akin to being inside the center of a languidly spinning black tornado, or funnel-like atmosphere. My next memory feels distinct from regular memory, but this is the best way I can articulate it. Initially, I found myself asking, "What am I?" Then, I believe I answered myself, almost nonchalantly, with, "Oh, I am me." Emotionally, I felt neutral. My thoughts were devoid of my family, my parents, or anyone else. In fact, I experienced nothing but pure peace and contentment without the need for contemplation. I had no physical form, and I couldn't perceive myself. Then, in the next moment, it all transpired quickly, yet outside of time, a new presence emerged, but it was malevolent and angry, something monstrous yet imperceptible to me. I sensed it drawing closer, and it filled me with an overwhelming sense of fear. I felt as if it sought to consume me, rendering me utterly helpless. I didn't even comprehend what it was, but I instantly began to plead with my emotions. Within the span of a millisecond or so it seemed, I detected a small light growing exponentially larger and moving rapidly toward me, or perhaps, I was approaching it. It pulled me away from the eerie presence of the swirling darkness. I found myself enveloped in not only light, distinct from earthly light, more like spiritual radiance, but also in the most incredible, beautiful, wise, loving, and paternal presence. It initially surrounded me to provide solace. I distinctly remember that it knew me, and I knew it instantly. It was as if this being had known me throughout my entire existence, better than my family or even myself. I knew I could trust it, and I felt rescued by it. The presence had no physical form or gender, it was more like an entity of emotions, love, and benevolence. Profound benevolence, beyond anything imaginable. I immediately felt like a child, metaphorically kneeling at its feet, despite its lack of a body or gender. After comforting me, I experienced all the emotions I had ever felt in my life and all the emotions of those who had touched my life. It was like an immense ball of energy flowing through me. I had an epiphany of sorts, I saw all my weaknesses and strengths suddenly make sense. I took pleasure in that newfound understanding, although it didn't last beyond the initial joy of my realizations. I clung to this benevolent presence completely, much like a baby would cling to its mother. I felt like a tiny, amorphous spirit clinging to this incredible source of goodness and sinking into it with the most profound relief and joy. There was no pain, no sorrow, and no anxiety. It filled every void in my soul. Within this goodness, I felt whole yet dependent on it. Then, it began to communicate with me, almost instantaneously, through thoughts exchanged between us. I timidly and earnestly began to argue and implore it to allow me to remain. I adamantly refused to leave its presence, insisting that I was finally happy and continued to plead to stay. It communicated, without words, with the utmost gentleness and tenderness, much like a parent would comfort a small child. I reluctantly agreed, and part of me felt as though it was surprised I had arrived in the first place. I felt like it regarded me as an undeveloped soul that needed to grow further before staying, for reasons I couldn't fully comprehend. I wasn't given a choice. I do recall, in a sense, that it conveyed its love and care for me, but emphasized that I was not yet finished. I was gently sent back into the midst of darkness for a fraction of a second. At the fastest speed imaginable, I was thrust back into my body, accompanied by what felt like a loud, metallic sound. I opened my eyes to find my mother and best friend crying and panicking. An ambulance arrived shortly thereafter. I felt a mix of happiness for having had that experience and frustration at returning to my body. From that day onward, my headaches and migraines almost completely disappeared, although I still experience them occasionally. Since that day, when I'm around other people, I feel like a human antenna with an emotional radar, sensitive to an extraordinary degree. I also feel that I've occasionally sensed malevolent entities. One night, in the darkness, I perceived the outline of a presence that vanished as soon as I became aware of it. It was a benevolent presence, which seemed to appear and disappear shortly after I had been crying about my life. I believe it was an angel, for lack of a better word, though it lacked a face or wings. I believe that both malevolent and benevolent energies or spirits attract similar energies or spirits. When people experience anger, it can invite more malevolence. Perhaps it sounds unconventional, but I genuinely believe that throughout our time on Earth, we are surrounded by a variety of spirits.